Alright, so we're going to pan fry a steak. A lot of people think they can't pan fry a steak, or they're surprised you can pan fry a steak, or they're intimidated about pan frying a steak, or a lot of guys will say, well, I can only cook a steak on the barbecue. I almost prefer a pan fried steak. So we've got a heavy cast iron frying pan. You don't want a fancy frying pan. You don't want some Paderno or stainless steel cookware. You want an old cast iron frying pan. The older the better. When you cook with a cast iron frying pan, you put oils in here and heat it up. The polymers actually join with the pan, the metals in the pan. And even if you wash it, they're still there. So you're going to get a patina-like flavor from your old frying pan. And the more you use it, the better it's going to be. And you can wash it, but you can rub it out with a rag and some salt. And you notice when you heat it up sometimes, you'll actually get a little shine of oil in it. That's those polymer oils coming out of the frying pan. So heating up the frying pan. We can put the frying pan on the burner and heat it up. And we're going to make the bottom of the frying pan hot. And we're still going to be leaching out heat to the edge and the handle. So you want a kind of deeper heat in your frying pan. So there's two ways I'll do this. I'll put it on a medium burner for about 5 minutes. Not so it's smoking hot or doing anything crazy like that. Just so it's really radiating out the heat to the whole frying pan. Or I'll put my oven on about 300 or 350 and I'll pop it in the oven for 5 or 10 minutes. So I'm going to do that. If you're cooking a meal, you should almost have your oven on anyways, no matter what. Even if you don't think you're going to use it, it's just kind of a good thing to have. So of course the second most important thing is our steak. So this doesn't look very exciting. So what I've done is I've wrapped my steak in paper towel and left it overnight in the fridge, uncovered, to dry out. We want the outside of our steak to be as dry as possible. It takes 7 times as much energy to vaporize a molecule of water as it does to turn that same molecule, to take the same molecule volume by volume of sugar and caramelize it. And that's what we're doing with the crust of our steak. We want to caramelize the sugars and the proteins. So we want our steak to be dry, and we want it to almost get a little bit of a funk. I like to leave my steak out for 4 or 5 or 6 hours at room temperature, then put it back in the fridge and let the core temperature come down, and leave it wrapped in the paper towel overnight. So we can see now our steak does look pretty nice and dry. I'll just get rid of that. When I did this, I just went like this. I dried it off first, if it was in a package with a lot of moisture. I just did that, and I put it in. I like to put it in something like that, so it's got a little bit of a side, so you don't get any kind of cross contamination, or if it tips a little bit, there's no juices come out. So this is a grass-fed strip loin steak from outside Cache Creek, BC, that I cut myself. It's got a fair bit of marble. You want your steak to be at least an inch thick. If your steak is less than an inch thick, I hope you're cooking breakfast. You want to cook the biggest steak possible, because you got a little bit of conflict of interest going on with your cookery. You want to get the outside of the steak, you want to get this incredible crust, but you want to slow down the cooking process on the inside. Otherwise, the protein strands are going to get tight and tough. So the slower you can make the inside cook, the more tender your steak is going to be. One of the ways to do that is, of course, to have a great hot cast iron frying pan and a big, thick steak. We kind of look at steaks in North America as something that we eat ourselves. Look at it as something where you're going to cook. Cook a big steak, or cook 2 or 3 big steaks, or if you're 3 or 4 people, cook 2 giant steaks and slice the steaks up and serve them on a platter. Then you can cook maybe 2 different kinds of steaks. One of the steaks might be more done than the other. You don't necessarily have to finish a whole steak if you don't want to. You can take just a couple slices. So look at your steak that way. You want nice smooth edges on your steak. Again, you see here on this little cutting board, there's no water, there's no moisture. So we're going to season our steak. So a lot of people are going to put on stuff like these kind of things. Steak spice, barbecue spice. This is a smoky mesquite. Look at your seasoning for your steak as 2 things: your cooking seasoning and your finishing seasoning. And these are big, and when they sit on the steak, they're going to create this little barrier. that when we hit the pan, it's almost like putting something like a giant box on the floor with marbles underneath. It's not going to contact the cast iron. It's not going to get that crust. So we're going to season the steak. We want to use like fine sea salt and freshly ground black pepper, but we want it to be fine. So, well, here we go. Here's the pepper grinder. You have to put, I'll make that a little finer. You have to put a lot of seasoning on your steak. Beef is an incredibly powerful flavor, and it will take a lot of seasoning. As you can see here, I have a fine sea salt. It's very fine. Put a fair bit on both sides of your steak. It might seem like it's excessive, and it probably is excessive, but it's still just the right amount. So when we cook our steak, it's probably going to take about 6 minutes. It's important when the steak is done that we let it rest for about 5 minutes. So when you're making your meal, think about this. You're going to have this 5 minutes. So let's say you're making a meal and you're going to have this 5 minutes. That's a good time maybe to steam some vegetables. Maybe you have some potatoes or starch already done, staying warm in the oven, but you're going to have this 5 minutes. You can steam some vegetables, something like that. Plan ahead. Think about where your meal is going to be. When you're actually cooking the steak, you shouldn't really be doing anything else. It requires all your attention. And if you don't have a fan on, and if it isn't really noisy, and if it isn't really smoky, you're not really doing it right, as we're going to see. So, I'm going to put my pan on pretty hot. And I'm going to recommend some vegetable shortening and butter. So the butter will get brown, it'll almost burn. And if we just use oil or olive oil or straight vegetable shortening or straight vegetable oil, it's never going to be as tasty as when the milk solids in the butter start to brown or caramelize. So if you can't use butter or you don't want to use butter, that's fine. You can just use straight oil. But the butter's making a big difference, like a really big difference. I'm going to start with a little bit of shortening in the pan, because when the butter hits the pan, it will almost immediately start to burn and go brown. And the shortening first will just help to carry it around the pan a little bit. I can tell we're getting a little hot there. We'll get a little hotter. I have a couple things here. I have some whole garlic that's not peeled. I have 2 herbs from the garden, thyme and rosemary. And about the time where I'm, say, halfway through cooking the steak, I'm going to add these to the pan. And when they hit the hot oil, they're going to release the natural oils in themselves and help to flavor the steak. When we're done, they'll be kind of burnt or overcooked and we'll discard them. And that's fine. Leave the peel on the garlic. Otherwise, when it hits the oil, the actual flesh of the garlic might burn and go a little bit bitter. So we'll start with a little vegetable shortening. No, that's not hot enough. We'll have to get a little hotter. I don't know if Sharon wants to pause here or... Alright, so our vegetable shortening has gone around the pan. It's starting to smoke a little bit. I'll take a pat of butter. Remember, if you heated your pan in the oven, the handle's hot. And as I start to see the butter go brown, I'll take my tongs. I'm kind of going to wait until the last minute here because I want that caramelization of the butter. It'll start to happen just as the foam subsides, and I'll put it in there. So now, our steak is leaching heat from the bottom of the pan, but it's being replenished from the edges that we preheated in the oven. And we got a much better chance of maintaining that high heat. As you can see, there's lots of smoke, and I'll move it around a little bit because that's a fresh spot on the pan, and it hasn't cooled off yet. So we'll keep tilting it, move the oils and the butters around, move it around. We can always throw the steak in the oven for a minute if we get a nice crust. If we don't get the nice crust to start, we're kind of screwed. What can we do? We can't go back and add the crust. Like I said, if it's not making a little spattering, if it's not making a lot of smoke, you're not doing it right. You see we're starting to get the crust there. There's going to be a point here as well, because it's spattering a little bit, I will have to actually add a little more butter. Often at the halfway mark. Again, look at the crust. Now I will add another little bit of butter. Now I'll add this rosemary, some of the thyme, and garlic. You see them sizzle in there. Unfortunately, you can't smell it, but it does smell really good. Turn my heat down just a little bit. And I'll continue to roll it around. So I have a meat thermometer like this. They're about $30 on Amazon. This one has a long cord that can go actually in the oven. So at this point, to make things easy, I'm going to stick the probe in there. I'm going to turn it on. You can't see that there, but it's showing me 115. I will turn my burner off. I want to go to about 129, 128 on this stove. And if you get one that has this metal kind of cord, you can just leave it. And now we've got a more relaxed cooking, so we're dealing with our kind of conflict of interest. The inside is being cooked lower and slower, and we're not contracting the muscle fibers, so we're going to get a tender steak. So maybe we want to cut for a minute, Sharon?
Yeah.
We at 125?
We're at 124.21. 126.
There we go, 126. We'll take it out. Set my thermometer's caught. There we go. So there we go. We'll take the thermometer out. 125, it's still pretty rare. One thing I didn't point out, if you're concerned about having the burner on such high heat with all the oils, just keep a lid handy. If you do have a fire, just cover it up, take it off the burner, wait for it to go out. Give you some peace of mind. So, can you hear that? Can you hear it? Yeah, that's our crust. So now we want about a 5-minute rest. When we want to rest it, we want to cover it up. So if you happen to have the wrapper from your butter handy, that's great. Or you can use a piece of aluminum foil. But if you do, you can keep these in your fridge when you take them off of the butter and save them for stuff like this. It's good if you have a roast chicken or a roast pork you want to let rest. I mean, you can imagine it's just going to taste a little better than covering up in foil. We're going to cover it. If you want to be really luxurious, I made a little bit of garlic butter. So I might take a little bit of the garlic butter and rub it on the steak. And then cover it just loosely with our butter wrapper. And now we have 5 minutes to get a glass of wine, steam our vegetables, put some dressing on our salad, just relax, and come back to it in 5 minutes. Right, that's been about 5 minutes. I like to put on the latex glove for stuff like this. Keeps my hands clean. If you're making dinner, you're probably going to go right to have dinner. You can just take the glove off. So there's our steak. I went to 125. It's rested for about 5 minutes. It's going to be kind of rare. If you wanted a little more, you could go to about 130. And it'll come out with a lot more pink. Let me just move this here. And we'll slice it. So even if I'm having a steak by myself, I will still slice it and often put it on a plate. I don't have to eat the whole thing. I can eat the parts I'm more interested in. Just fun and elegant. So remember when we started off, I talked about the cooking seasonings and the finishing seasonings in relation to things like the salt. So there's our steak. Can we get a? Can you get in there? Is that? It's a pretty rare. If we went to about 130, it'd be more like medium. Have we got it?
Mm-hmm.
All right. So I've got a plate here. I've got some more thyme from my garden. I'll just put the steak right on top. I'll push it a little bit. And a couple ways you can finish your steak. If you are interested in seasonings like this, steak spice or chipotle kind of seasonings or mesquite barbecue things, sprinkle them on now. This is a good time to put them. Another thing you can use to finish your steak, just a little drizzle of fish sauce. It's got an incredible umami flavor. Just give it a little drizzle of fish sauce. A little swish on the plate of a really good quality mustard. A really nice soy sauce, a good quality one. This one's from Japan. You can probably find a good quality one here from Japan. Again, a little drizzle of soy sauce. Just a little bit, quarter teaspoon, half a teaspoon to finish off your steak. Or I got a flavored salt here. I got a flavored mushroom salt. I got in Iceland. You can find flavored salts all over the place. Maybe you like chipotle salt or something. Just put a little sprinkle of your chipotle salt on here. And you have your pan-fried steak. So, aside from the smoke and stuff like that, do we have a good shot there? That's our pan-fried steak. You can do this. I think you can do this. You can make a pan-fried steak. You can do it.